Hi, welcome to A Film Darkly, where I discuss the philosophical concepts found within movies. I'm your host, Anthony Pacino, and I wanted to apologize because usually I have an episode out every week, or at least that's going to be my goal. But this last week, I got really sick and wasn't able to really talk much. I had a horrible cough, so I'm putting this out a little later. Which means I'll probably have 2 podcasts out by the end of this week. But today's episode is going to be on signs. And my last 4 episodes were all sort of linked together, talking about human nature. And this time I'm not really doing that. I don't have a series idea right at the moment. Well, I do have some ideas, but those are all in motion. So today I wanted to do Signs because Signs is a film that I have sort of been harping on for a long time with people, because a lot of people tend to bag on M. Night Shamalan. And rightfully so, because he came out with a lot of crappy movies. But he also has a lot of movies that are really strong philosophically, and they actually have some really nice little ideas embedded in them that are not always found in the simple concept of the movie itself. So, for instance, if you are familiar with Signs, which hopefully you've seen it, if not, I'm actually not going to get super spoilery. I sort of am, though, because I am going to talk about the end, but I'm not going to be super detailed. So if you're familiar with Signs is a story about a family that I don't remember where exactly they live. I know it's somewhere out in the middle of nowhere, and they have a farm and everything and crops. And what happens is the crop circles start appearing on their land. And if you're not familiar with crop circles, you can just look them up. They're very, very interesting designs that are put into crops. Usually things like wheat and cornfields usually have them. They do in various fields, though, all over the world. And crop signs are really, really strange. And they have a real good way of how they do it. So it's not so much of a mystery anymore where they think that aliens are doing them. But that was the original idea, was aliens are creating these crops, these crop signs, or whatever you want to refer to them as. And the movie Signs plays on that. There was actually an old teaser that came out for the film, where all it did was show various places around the world that have these crop signs put in or whatnot. And essentially, leading to the question, are these aliens, and have they been warning us for a long time? And I think that was actually one of the quotes in the film, was in the trailer, was something like, "They've been warning us, they're coming," or something like that. And so it was M. Night Shyamalan's attempt at an alien film. And what was interesting about it, one of the aspects I always liked, was that it was about one of these families that dealt with one of these crop circles. They dealt with one of these crop signs. And this family is sort of like out in the middle of nowhere, like I said before. So they don't it's not like an Independence Day type film where they're right in the middle of it all, and neither are the aliens attacking in the same manner. In fact, the movie itself has the character of Morgan, which is the young boy of Graham Hess, who is played by Mel Gibson. And Morgan has this point where he's actually talking about aliens and how they would take over. And that one writer suggested that aliens would never take over with force, because they understand that we would use weapons that would destroy and end up ruining our resources, which is what they would be after. So that's what was the interesting factor about this movie, was that it kind of played into all these various ideologies, but it gives you this perspective of this one family with this big global event that's occurring. And so the movie is just about them, how they have a crop circle or sign or whatever you want to call it. And they are trying to figure out how it got there because they didn't make it. And they start seeing them appearing all over the world, and then soon the ships start appearing. These ships just appear. They're just sort of sitting out there midair. And then there's the aliens themselves. And somebody catches a glimpse of one of them. Graham actually runs into one and is filled in this really like creepy scene. So this movie isn't like some of the other films that I've done where I'm going to be able to like quote all these points and break down the philosophical concept in the movie. Instead, I'm just going to kind of have to talk about the movie and just sort of reveal it that way and read a few quotes, because there are a few parts where they talk about some stuff and you kind of get what's going on here. So Signs isn't really about signs. It's not really about the crop circles. It's not really about the crop signs or whatever you want to call them. The reason I don't like using the word crop circles is because they're not always circles. So I know that sounds stupid, but it's true. Like, they're not always circles. So anyways, so the signs themselves isn't really what the movie's about. It's not even about the aliens. The aliens don't really mean anything in this movie. I think it's one of the reasons why it had this plot point that so many people disagreed with and hated about the aliens actually being weak to water. So it's like, why would they go to a planet that is mostly water? That makes no sense whatsoever. And that was one of the plot points that I know why Shamalan put it in there, but it ultimately ruined it for some people. However, it's there because Shamalan was sacrificing an element of story that really wouldn't make a lot of sense in order to give you a bigger message. And when you understand it from that perspective, you kind of overlook or look past the whole water thing like I do. Signs is literally one of my favorite movies ever. Like, if I'm talking about like a movie that I just love watching, this is one of those movies. So that's one of the things that kind of why I defend it so much, is because I like it so much. But it's the endings, it's the way this film comes together and what this concept is, which is something that I discovered a really long time ago. I was working in a movie theater a few years back, and I was sitting in the theater, and I used to have to, clean the theaters, and I went to clean Signs numerous times. And one day I actually had a little bit of a break before I had to clean the next theater, which was the Signs theater. So I went inside and I watched the ending of the movie. And I had already seen the film, which I had already enjoyed it as an alien flick. But the second time I watched it, or when I saw this ending again, everything hit me, and it hit me like a freight train. Like, it just blew me away, the concept that this movie was playing with, and how I understood what it was actually trying to say. So the movie continues with people sort of freaking out, and in the very end of it, you find out that the aliens are there not for the resources of Earth, but to use humans themselves as a resource. They're actually looking to farm humans, so to speak. So that's what they're there for. Is in the end of the whole movie is what you find out. But throughout the film, you find out various things about the characters themselves, and one of the main points you want to look at is Graham himself, played by Mel Gibson. Mel Gibson character Graham used to be a priest. He used to actually be a father, and he was obviously the priest of the town that they lived near, and where it's one of those towns where just everybody knows each other, and so they still sort of treat him that way, even though he's given up his position as a priest and he's no longer that. They still refer to him as father. They still refer to him as a religious individual. It's pretty interesting. because there's scenes where people actually confess their sins to him. There's a scene, the very start of the film, you have this sheriff go out there, and she's talking to him, and she keeps referring to him as father. And he has to remind her to stop calling him that. So you kind of wonder, well, what happened to Graham that made him give up on all this? Well, what made him give up on God and give up on his faith was this incident that happened with his wife, Colleen. Colleen was out walking late one night after having dinner, like she usually does, and a man named Ray Reddy hit her with his, I think it was a truck, and pinned her to a tree, and she died. And before she died, actually, we're kind of getting this throughout the film. We kind of keep getting images of that day, that night, but it never fully is realized. For whatever reason, we kind of keep getting cut off until the end of the movie. And at the end of the movie, we kind of see what happens. And the reason why we see what happens is because it's supposed to lead us into the main concept of this movie and what this movie is playing with. So Graham has lost his faith because God wasn't there to save his wife. It made no sense. Why did that happen? Why would God allow this atrocity? So this movie is also playing with something C.S. Lewis referred to as the issue of pain, I think is what he called it, the problem of pain. It's the problem of suffering that people have when they believe in God. You believe in God and you have all this faith in God, and yet the world is full of disaster. People murdering each other all the time, and where's God in all that? Where's God in these great atrocities? And that's sort of what this movie's playing with as well, where they're showing this guy who's lost his faith because of something that happened to his wife. And in a way, you rightfully so. I mean, you sympathize with him. I'm sure many of you have watched this film and said, oh yeah, I wouldn't believe in God either. But you see at the very, very, very end of the film, he picks up God again. And so you say, well, what happened? And this is a part that I never really completely caught until I watched it the second time around. And I don't know, maybe I'm just that slow, maybe, or I don't know what it is exactly. But you kind of see that Graham's faith is gone. And you see it's gone in various moments throughout the film. He talks about his wife at one point being pinned down to his brother Merle, played by Joaquin Phoenix. And he tells Merle, he's like, my wife said, Merle, swing away, when I was talking to her. And he's like, the reason she said that was because the truck that pinned her to the tree was cutting off her nerves, and now her nervous system was going wild. So her brain was going haywire. And what she was doing was recalling one of Meryl's old baseball games, because Meryl apparently used to be this sort of it sounds almost like he was AAA, this AAA baseball player who hit massive home runs, and he had the record for the longest home run ever. And there's a point actually where Meryl's talking to a military officer and a recruiter, and the guy's telling him, why aren't you rich right now? Why aren't you playing sports? And this guy named Lionel, who's went to school with Merle, says because Merle basically, even though he had the home run record, Merle also had the most strikeouts of any batter in the league. In fact, that's his second record. His other record is that he has the most strikeouts in the history of the league. And when Merle's walking out, or before Merle walks out, Merle actually says something, and he says, it felt wrong not to swing. So that's one of our clues to what's going on here and what this all means. Now, throughout the movie, so when we find that out, though, about Merle being a baseball player, we understand what Graham's talking about when he says she had a memory of one of your games, and she was just basically recalling that and saying, swing away, Merle. So all it was science. It was just scientific just something that happened, neurons going off in the brain, causing her to recall some event. And that's it. That's all it was. So that's part of Graham's whole, vision of everything. Now, since I just talked about the part where Merle says, felt wrong not to swing, I should also bring up Bo. And Bo's Graham's daughter. And Bo has this weird little OCD thing about her. This germophobic thing about her where she cannot finish a glass of water. So all over her house, all over the living room are glasses of water. Just everywhere. Everywhere there's a glass of water. Always. Because every time she gets a glass, she drinks a little and she says, it's contaminated. It's got hair in it. It's got, at one point she says, it's got Morgan's amoebas in it. So that lets you know something about Morgan. Morgan has asthma. And Morgan's also the kind of kid that's really, really scientific, in fact. He loves to think. He loves to draw conclusions. And he doesn't mind looking into conspiracies. Morgan is not at all afraid to look at anything and to consider anything, which is what a true scientist is supposed to do. So Morgan, throughout the film, is actually looking up all these things on aliens, and he's buying into what's going on. And there's even a point in the movie where they have Bo's I keep trying to remember what those things are called, where you have a baby in the room, a baby monitor, and at one point the sheriff actually tells Morgan, you can use Bo's baby monitor as sort of like a one-sided walkie-talkie, but it'd be kind of cool just to use it and have it as a toy. And he's like, okay. So at one point in the movie, there's this intense scene where they're handing it the baby monitor. Meryl, I think, is passing it to Graham, and when he does, as soon as they pass it, they hear something really weird, like this signal. And they hear something like clicking noises and everything. And so Morgan's like, it's the aliens. And Graham's like, come on. And Merle's like, kind of like, I don't know. And then at one point, Merle's like, no, don't move it. You'll lose the signal. And Graham gives him this look like, you're falling into this. Like, you're believing it. Because Graham's kind of really he's so skeptical after his wife's death that everything he looks at is natural explanation alone. And that's all he wants to look at is natural explanation. Kind of interesting because we sort of see that today, where people always want to look at natural explanations. Nobody wants there to be an explanation outside of what they know to be true in the natural, because, well, it might bring on other ideas that no one wants to deal with. No one wants to deal with these sorts of things. This kind of brings to mind the flat earthers. The flat earthers that we see right now are actually talking about this same stuff. They're sort of bringing up these like, why do you believe the scientists? Why do you just assume that's all true? And, why not think twice about it all? And it's all very fascinating and interesting. I'm not by any means a flat earther, but I'm just saying that people, people kind of bring up the same points where it's like, why are you just such a naturalist that you can't possibly think outside the lines? And so Graham, though, is sort of like our skeptic, and he's the guy we're seeing everything through. We are watching his kids. We are watching his brother, Merle. But the fact of the matter is we are stuck on Graham, and we're stuck on the skepticism that Graham continues to put forth. And you sort of fall along with Graham. I mean, I know I did, where I was like, yeah, Graham's right. Like, why are you guys thinking this? But you slowly see the evidence that Graham is kind of dismissing, but Morgan's not. And Merle stops dismissing. Meanwhile, Bo is just sort of there, but she's doing her whole water glass thing and being cute as can be and making you laugh. So there comes a point in the movie, and I think I said enough of what I need to say about everyone. Bo has her fixation with water. Merle feels wrong not to swing. Morgan and his games, and he has asthma. and Graham and his skepticism. And so now there's this point in the movie where they're actually watching TV late at night, Graham and Merle. And they're sitting there, and I can't remember exactly how the scene goes, but I know they're looking at the news stuff on the aliens. And there's this long quote I have here where Graham tells Merle something. And he says, people break down into two groups. When they experience something lucky, group number one sees it as more than luck, more than coincidence. They see it as a sign, evidence, that there is something up there watching out for them. Group number two sees it as just pure luck, just a happy turn of chance. I'm sure the people in group number two are looking at those 14 lights in a very suspicious way. He's talking about the alien ships. For them, the situation is 50-50, is a 50-50. Could be bad, could be good, but deep down, they feel that whatever happens, they're on their own. And that fills them with fear. Yeah, there are those people, but there's a whole lot of people in group number one. When they see those 14 lights, they're looking at a miracle. And deep down, they feel that whatever's going to happen, there will be someone there to help them. And that fills them with hope. See, what you have to ask yourself is, what kind of person are you? Are you the kind that sees signs? That sees miracles? Or do you believe that people just get lucky? Or look at the question this way. Is it possible that there are no coincidences? And Merle tells this funny little story where he says, one time I was at this party, and I was sitting on the couch with Amanda McKinney. She was just sitting there looking beautiful. So I lean in to kiss her, and I realize I have gum in my mouth. So I turn to spit it out and put it in a paper cup. I turn back, and Amanda McKinney throws up all over herself. I knew the moment it happened, it was a miracle. I could have been kissing her when she threw up. It would have scarred me for life. I may never have recovered. He goes on to say, that's a miracle. I'm a miracle man. That's a miracle. To which Graham responds, there's no one looking out for us. We're all alone. And Graham tells him that after telling him the story about his wife and the neurons going to her head, making her think of a game. So what Graham's doing is Graham's saying, Merle, I know you think that your little story was something real, but it's just a coincidence. It's a coincidence like anything else. And the fact of the matter is that, like the situation with my wife, I could say it was a coincidence, as she said, Merle swing away. But the fact of the matter is, the truck pinned her to the tree. The neurons were going firing off in her mind, and she recalled a game. Because her brain is primitive and finite, and it recalls that. So Graham's skepticism sets in. And Merle doesn't have really much of a response to that, which I think is an issue on the filmmaker, from the filmmaker perspective, because I actually think that he should have had a response to that. So we kind of get this whole thing of where Graham really is sitting and where Merle's sitting. So now you understand why Merle thought, oh, we're going to lose the signal with the aliens, whereas Graham was like, come on, dude. So then there's this whole scene with Ray Reddy, where Ray Reddy is played by M. Night Shamalan, and he's the one who killed Colleen. And Ray Reddy actually at one point says, I've never fallen asleep while driving before. It had to be at that right moment. That 10-15 seconds when I passed her walking. It's like it was meant to be. So Ray, M. Night Shyamalan's character, is becoming our main point. He's letting us know what this is coming down to. And so we have these scenes where Graham is kind of running into the aliens constantly. I mean, just constantly. Like, he has the whole thing in the tree, his crops. He has this whole part where he goes to Ray Reddy's house and finds an alien inside of the cupboard, and he literally is like literally cuts off the fingers of one of the aliens, which is pretty interesting. A little intense scene. And it all comes down to, here come the aliens. And so they board everything up. They make whatever food they want. There's this whole scene where they're crying together. Morgan is telling Graham how much he hates him. And then there's this point where Morgan's telling everyone about his children. Telling the children about when they were born. And there's this whole thing with the aliens, and they take on the aliens. They see, there's a part where the alien's hand's coming in from under a doorway. And then there's a part where they're stuck down in the basement because the aliens are breaking in, and one of the aliens' hands is through this little like vent thing and grabs Morgan, and Morgan has an asthma attack. And so Morgan's having this asthma attack, and Graham is sitting there holding Morgan and trying to calm him and saying it's going to pass through, it's going to pass, because they don't have his medicine with them. And Graham at one point breaks down and says, "I hate you." And it's obvious he's talking to someone, but he just says, "I hate you." And it's obvious, I think, he's talking to God. Because first his wife, now possibly his boy. And that hurts him very, very badly. So the end of the movie comes, and they wake up in the morning, and they manage to make it through the night, and Morgan is still having his asthma attack. So they know they need to go get not his inhaler, but there's an actual like shot that they need to give him that will open up his lungs. And they go in there and they put him on the couch, and all of a sudden they hear Bo scream, and they turn around, and there's Merle, Graham, Bo looking at this alien holding Morgan. And now the aliens, remember, came to harvest humans. Now they find that out over the radio, because on the radio they're telling him they actually came to harvest humans, but now they're running away. Why are they running away? And when they say, when they're asking the question, why are they running away, you really don't understand why. There is a part though where Ray Reddy gives a little bit of a sign, if you will, of why. Because he says, "I don't think they like water." And so when you're looking at the alien who's holding Morgan, you see one of his fingers are missing. He has some fingers missing. He's obviously the one that was locked in Ray Reddy's cupboard and had his fingers chopped off by Graham. So he's sitting there holding Morgan, and he pulls out this little tiny needle from his wrist, and he shoots this substance into Morgan's nose. And at that moment in time, Graham reminisces on his wife. And this is when we finally get their conversation, where he goes to her and he finds out she's dying. So she was pinned to the tree, but she still has some remaining moments. She's not quite dead yet. But if they pull the truck away, she's most definitely going to die. So there's nothing they can do. She's gone. And she's talking to Graham, and she tells Graham at one point, "Tell Morgan to play games. It's okay to be silly." Graham says, "I will." Colleen then says, "Tell Bo to listen to her brother. He'll always take care of her." And he says, "I will." She says, "And tell Graham." And Graham's like, "I'm here." She says, "Tell Graham, see. Tell him to see. And tell Merle to swing away." Now this is interesting. Why is she saying tell Graham to see? Because Graham is the skeptic who doesn't want to see. Remember, the signal wasn't the aliens, the signal was something else. Remember, the lights in the sky weren't were not a miracle, they were a coincidence. Her talking to him and telling him, "Merle, swing away," a coincidence. So she's saying, tell Graham to see. Tell Morgan to play games. It's okay to be silly. The whole movie, Morgan's looking at alien stuff and everyone thinks he's really silly for doing it. Tell Bo to listen to her brother. He'll always take care of her. And we do see that throughout the film. It's not really anything about the water, but it does have to do with, them listening. Her just simply saying something very motherly. Tell Merle to swing away. And at that moment, Graham understands something. And Merle happens to be standing next to his bat that had given him the record home run. And Graham tells Merle, swing away. Swing away, Merle. And Merle takes the bat and swings away at the alien and starts to fight it. And he hits the alien falls over, hits a television or something, and a glass of water falls on it and starts to melt at its skin. And you look around the entire room, there's this panning shot, glasses of water everywhere because of Bo's OCD. So Merle's it felt wrong not to swing coming in handy. He felt wrong not to swing because he was always supposed to swing. Perhaps for this one moment. Bo in her anxiety / OCD / germophobia with water. Why? To set up the perfect atmosphere for when they dealt with that alien. So it's and Graham's skepticism of his wife, his losing his faith in God. Why? Because if he didn't have that, he wouldn't be able to see. Now you're probably saying to yourself, wait a minute, his skepticism was keeping him from seeing. Was it? It was Graham's skepticism that allowed him to continue to see. Because Graham was so skeptical, Graham continued to run into these evidences. And his wife's telling him, see, because this is the moment in which Graham needs to think to himself, what is it that I've been seeing all this time? That only he has been seeing. Only he dealt with the alien. Only he saw the alien in the field. Only he is observing everything from the outside. Tell Graham to see. So Graham's been a skeptic this whole time and hasn't been seeing, even though the evidence has been right in front of his face. And now his wife is telling him, see. In some ways, it's strange to say this, but even Merle, being a man of coincidence, or a man of no coincidence, a man of miracles, never saw what Graham saw. Because Merle wasn't a skeptic. Merle wasn't able to take up all the evidence because Merle bought into the first little bit of evidence that came his way. There's something said about an individual who lives their whole life and doesn't believe something, but all of a sudden and is collecting evidence, and one day comes to the conclusion that that thing they didn't want to believe in was actually true. You're never going to find a person you will not convince more than a person who goes down that journey. Never. It's hard to convince a person who's gone down that path that they're wrong. Because they didn't go down the path the same way everyone else did. They weren't raised in it. They weren't susceptible to miracles. They were skeptical. Now, is there the possibility of always being stuck in your skepticism? Yeah, there is. When someone doesn't tell you to see. But Graham was told to see. And Graham finally saw. And when Graham saw, he saw everything that was happening. So when Merle's fighting the alien with the bat, Graham takes up his son, Morgan, runs outside with the shot in order to help his lungs. And this is what he says. That's why he had asthma. It can't be luck. His lungs were closed. His lungs were closed. No poison got in. No poison got in. His lungs were closed. His lungs were closed. Morgan had asthma to prevent that one day from happening. And Graham learns the biggest lesson of all. If his wife didn't die that night, if she wasn't pinned to that tree and didn't have the neurons firing off in her brain, she never would have said those things. And Graham would have been lost and never would have saw. He never would have told his brother to swing away. He never would have saw that Bo's glasses of water were creating the perfect atmosphere to fight. He never would have saw that his son's games and his son's asthma were going to save them all. Or going to save him from certain death. And that is when Graham saw the hand of fate. Because that's what this film is really talking about. It's talking about fatalism. And it's talking about fate itself. And obviously it's giving a very religious spin on it. But it is talking about how things happen and how we often can look at things in the most skeptical and alien way, such that Graham saw it, can be missing out because we don't see like Graham saw that there was something at work. It's where the saying comes from, God works in mysterious ways. Take what you want with that. Do what you want with that. The point is, the ultimate point here, is that fate is a silly little thing. But it sometimes makes you wonder, especially when you look back at your life, would some of the things have happened in your life? Would you appreciate some of the things that have happened in your life if they didn't go down the way they went down? It's an interesting concept to think about. So that's going to do it for me today. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Please share, like, and subscribe. I haven't really put that at the end of my audios, but I feel like it's important that I do. I'm just looking to try and get out there more. And so if you enjoy this audio and you think other people should be listening to it, then please do so. Thanks. Bye.